Women's Day, everybody.
Yes, sorry, yes, the most important thing. This is a bit I love. It's Celebrity Squares.
Yeah.
We've got lots of people joining.
I'm seeing how many I'm getting on a thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 20.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day. I'm just letting everyone in and we'll just wait a few moments while everyone joins. But thank you for joining us for our mentoring event. Just to let you know that we are recording this session, just so that the people that have missed, they've booked on but they might have missed this session for whatever reason, they can watch it back afterwards after today. Okay, I think we have got pretty much everyone. So if we get started, oh, a few people. So thanks again for joining. We're really delighted to have you with us for this mentoring event. Hope you take lots away from it and hope you join in and contribute. I know Dina's got a practical exercise for everyone to make the most of, and I will introduce Dina to you as well. So Dina Arstall is the founder of Simply Racing. She's also a coach, and she was instrumental in the setting up of the Women in Racing mentoring program, which I run. My name's Lucy Gurney. I'm part of the Women in Racing committee. And so any questions about the mentoring program, do ask away. So I think we are all here now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen with you because we've got a little message from Anne-Marie Phelps, who is the chair of the BHA. She really wanted to join and support the event, but she had a double booking today. So she sent us a video message instead. So I'll just pop that on now.
Thank you, Women in Racing, for organising today's event on mentorship. And I'm really sorry not to be able to be with you in person. But I just wanted to reflect on, I guess, what mentorship has meant to me throughout my career. I've had a number of people who I would consider mentors, sometimes formally and sometimes completely informally, and some of the informal ones are some of the best. I think back to people like my grandmother, who really was an inspiring lady and taught me to really, if I set my mind on something, I could do it, or I could get pretty damn close to it. And other people like Dame Di Ellis, who was my predecessor at British Rowing as chair, who was a fantastic lady, always there to tap me on the shoulder, push you forward, encourage you to try and do things that you might not otherwise have done, and who shared her tricks of the trade, I suppose, in terms of chairing meetings and putting yourself in other people's shoes. So really giving me confidence to do things. Another lady who I relied on quite heavily was Liz Nichol, who is now president of the International Netball Federation, but was at the time chief exec at UK Sport, who was a fantastic woman for being able to pick up the phone to, and she would always make time for a coffee or a chat. If I wanted just to bounce some ideas off her, she would always really help me by giving her independent view of the situation to help me make the best choice for me. So mentorship can mean all sorts of things to all sorts of people. But I think that whether you are a mentor or being mentored, there's equally something to gain. And I've really enjoyed the experiences I've had with helping and advising both men and women over the years to help them make decisions about their careers or about the choices that are in front of them. So I hope you have a fantastic discussion today. It's a great day to be doing this on International Women's Day. And I really look forward to seeing you all on a race course or in a stable yard in the very near future. Bye for now.
So I'll hand over to Dina now, who will facilitate the workshop and the discussion to follow.
Well, thanks, Lucy, and thanks in absentia to Anna-Marie, who, as ever, gave a really inspiring message and is so supportive of all the work women in racing are doing around mentoring and around mentoring in the industry as a whole. So I think it sets us up for a quite full day of discussion. There'll be questions and exercise, but I think for those of you who have attended our sessions before, we try and keep them as interactive as possible with some content in there. We've got a wide audience. Some people will be mentors, some will be mentees. So we want everybody to have an understanding of where they fit into the picture and offer their insights. So the session is going to last an hour and a half. We'll try and get through the content part in the first hour to hour and 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for general questions. If you have questions as we go along, add them to the chat board, and we'll come up to them, you know, in the last session. But also feel free to answer questions in person, raise a hand. If possible, we'll keep them towards the end, but if something's really pressing, by all means, Lucy will let you in, and we'll have that conversation. So, mentoring. Well, as Anna-Marie said, it means different things to different people. And I think I'm going to just throw out a question to begin with, just to get us in the habit of opening up on Zoom. And normally I would ask everybody to introduce themselves, but one of the advantages of Zoom is I can see all your names, and you can as well. So it'll save some time. But I would like to throw out there, what would you like to get out of this session? Just wonder if anybody wants to volunteer and just come in and answer straight away, take themselves off mute. Who would like to volunteer something? Sarah?
I was going to say solidarity. I think that's what I like about these sorts of sessions, especially in lockdown. A sense of solidarity.
Super. Excellent. So that's one thing. Anybody else? Right. Janet, you've come up with something. Could you express that?
I can. I was just coming off mute there. It'd be great to hear everybody's experiences of mentoring, what's worked for them, what's not worked for them, any good tips, that kind of thing.
Great. That's something we will be coming to. So thanks for that, Janet. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say positivity. I think everyone's probably found the past year quite challenging, so I think a bit of inspiration and some kind of positive mindset would be great.
That's super. Thanks for that, Ross. So again, immediately, if you listen to those answers, slightly different to what we would get a year ago. If we're talking about mentoring a year ago and the sessions we've had over the last few years, generally when you answer a question like that, it's going to be about career progression, questions I should ask, I'm coming up for an interview, what should I be asking of my mentor to help me progress, and or on the other side, I'm struggling with what to give my mentee. Here we've got a slightly more general feeling where well-being comes into it. We're very cognizant of what we've been going through as a world and also of an industry over the last year. So today I'm going to focus on mentoring more as a general life skill rather than purely something that's going to help your profession or your career, though we will touch on that later on. I'd say the art of skillful mentoring has never been more important than it is now. Many people are in very different mental states to even a few months ago, let alone a year ago. And also their priorities have changed. So if you've been mentoring somebody over that period of time, you might not have realized that their focus perhaps has changed. So focusing purely on their career now might not be the right answer for them. And you might be pushing something towards an objective or a goal that under mental stress that they're in, or just the position career-wise they're in, it might actually be harmful. At this time, the mentee might feel pressurized, won't necessarily be that keen to opening up in what's going on, or might have done with some people not got the answer, might feel that opening up to you as a mentor isn't appropriate because you're there to be dealing with their career, not their personal problems. And so they feel highly vulnerable, and they might see their career as on hold at best or failing at worst. So I think as mentors, we've got to be very aware that the agenda might have changed for the people we're working with, and be cognizant of that and make sure we're asking the right questions. So let's talk about what mentoring is first, and then we'll talk about what it isn't. And we're very lucky today that Beck Edmonds, our Godolphin winner, is here with us. And one thing that really resonated when Beck won the award was the way everybody described her as a wonderful mentor. And she described mentoring as something that obviously comes incredibly naturally to her. But I'd like to ask, Beck, for you, what do you see as mentoring?
Well, I feel a little bit out of my depth because I've never really thought of myself as doing it specifically. It's just part of my job that you know, I'm head girl here, and the new lads that come into the yard, they need guidance and they need help and they need showing the ropes. And I mean, it just sort of flows very easily. I mean, I'm quite a people person. I like to get to know people and their backgrounds and things about them. So then the communication becomes easier, and you're talking about, I don't know, I mean, things from just mucking out a stable. You don't just tell them to muck out a stable, you explain the reasonings behind why we do it a certain way, and sort of the education starts right from day one, you know, especially with the young lads. And why do we put certain bits of tack on a horse? I mean, I did a degree in horses years ago, so the knowledge is there. And I find that if you explain things as you go along, when you're doing things from day one, then the communication's easier both ways. People will come and ask you questions about things, and it's not that I'm in charge, so what I say goes. It's if I explain it to them, they understand it more. So it's not like it doesn't come across as nagging so much when you say, you know, you just need to do this a bit better, because the reasonings behind it have been explained to them. But I don't really, you know, like I said, I feel a little bit out of my depth there, because it's not really, I don't see myself as a mentor really. It's just doing my job.
And that's wonderful, Beck. You see yourself as out of your depth. God help the rest of us if you do, because I mean, it comes so naturally to you. Dominique, I just want you to follow up on that, because I know you're involved in the programme with NAS, and just wonder what your thoughts on mentoring and what it is.
I mean, I think it's like Beck says, it's definitely something that NAS have identified within the industry, that there are many people doing an amazing job of mentoring in the workplace without any recognition or a qualification. And like Beck says, she doesn't know that she's doing it, she's just doing it. And so we identified that there really was a gap there, and we wanted to, you know, make sure that every yard in the UK, if possible, had a qualified mentor. And it's not just, it's about supporting, I think we feel, and nurturing and growing the workforce and the people around you. It's about having a support bubble, especially during these times. And I think it's so important that there is somebody in any establishment or any workplace organisation where people feel that they can turn to them, whether it be a personal issue or work-based issue. And I think that naturally some people just take on that role. They're just a nurturing type person who, and I think that the staff do gravitate towards that member of staff unknowingly. And I think the person probably doesn't even know themselves that they're viewed as the mentor of the yard. But it's incredibly important that those people are recognised, and you know, that they're shown appreciation and recognition for the role that they take.
Super, Dominique. And I think that's so important, that a lot of people around the industry just do it unofficially, and what we're going to do is just put some parameters behind that for people that feel they need that. But it does come naturally to many, and one of those that everybody talks as a yard of good example wherever I've come across on the Racing Home project has been the Kublers. And I just wondered, Claire, what's your take on mentoring your staff and those around you?
It's a very good question. What is mentoring? Sometimes I struggle to find the definition for it, and as Beck said, it's what can come natural to people in racing yards. I think it's what Dominique has got going in NAS is fantastic, providing a more structured training course to help people understand, yes, I might have a natural affinity for mentoring, but how do I get better at it? You know, how do I actively listen to people and support them and nurture them? And it applies to all people in the industry. It's not just the young ones coming in. It's, you know, we all need help and support at times for different things. And it's fantastic. NAS have identified that. And we're very lucky in this industry, actually, that there are courses available. And I often wonder what's the difference between mentoring and coaching. And I know they now have the rider coaching, which we sent Lauren, our yard manager, on last year, and her confidence just grew massively from it. So often it is being able to do role plays in a more relaxed environment, so you can practice, I guess, so that you're more proficient when it actually comes to the real deal. So you don't mess it up or feel like you messed it up. Often it's not messing it up, it's just practice and yeah, being relaxed and open with people so that they can develop and grow.
Joe and Dana, actually, having you both on and just touching on that, what do you both see it as? I mean, Joe, perhaps start with you, because I know you feel passionately about it and you've seen it from outside the sport and bring it in now. Joe, can't hear you. Sorry, yeah, that's it.
My earphones out now. Hopefully you can hear me a bit better.
That's better. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, coming into the sport from other sports and seeing mentoring and coaching programs in other sports, I think for me, when it's geared towards the athlete, which is where I gear my focus as jockey development manager at the British Racing School, I think for us it was trying to have two separate programs, really, because the jockey coaching program for me is something that focuses a lot on or should focus on the performance of the jockey when they're trying to do their day-to-day job. Now, being a coach myself, I'm fully aware that coaches do fulfill a lot of roles, whether that's, you know, a counsellor, relationship advisor, careers expert. They can fulfill a number of roles, but what I was really trying to do was to bring in a mentoring program that would take that that side of things away from the coach, take that pressure off the coach, and bring in a mentoring program that had experts within it that had a career in racing, had a lot of knowledge and experience to give to jockeys. So I'm blessed, really, that the pilot mentoring program I've put together has some incredible people as part of it, and Dana is one of them, Dana Miller, and also Carrie Ford, who's on the call as well. We have some wonderful people within it, and it's only been going a month, but what I've tried to do is to put a female jockey mentoring program in place, which has mentors in it that can really relate to the mentees and can give over the benefit and the years of their knowledge and experience, so that it makes the navigation through a career maybe a little less bumpy for those female jockeys that are going through their initial stages of their career.
That's great, Joe. And just Dana and Karen, I think we'll probably open this up in the second half when we talk about questions more. But just your initial thoughts about the mentoring side, and I say I won't go into the difference between mentoring and coaching now. I'll touch on that myself, but I won't throw that curveball your way. But Dana, just your initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, just carrying on from you know, what Joe was saying, and also picking up on something Claire said, is about creating a space where you can practice something. So, you know, if you go on a training or a coaching course, you are given a safe space in order to practice maybe a skill, a new technique or something. So mentoring, I think, provides that same sort of safe space for you to process your thought processes maybe, or your emotions, or why are you where you are, your perspective. Should you be moving on? Should you stay where you are? Just those sort of questions that keep tapping on the shoulder. And sometimes the people who are closest to you, like your family and friends, aren't actually the best people to talk those things through with, because they might have a different agenda for you. So I think it's a really sort of independent space and a safe space to explore whatever it is you're facing. And I think just the other thing that's important to say is, as mentors, it's really important to have that safe space ourselves, to make sure we're always in a good place in order to support others. And that's something that I particularly picked up with Beck, actually, in the Licence Awards interviews, was that Beck is very good at, you know, creating a safe space for herself, so that she can then create that for others. So I think it's very important.
No, thanks, Dana. And Carrie, anything to add to that?
Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, now I'm kind of in the spotlight. I have to speak now, but just a little bit shy to start with. When we set off, I think my kind of hopes for joining everybody today was to try and, you know, gain as much help and advice as I can do from all of your expertise, you know, to make myself a better mentor. But I think really, very much like Beck said to start with, I think it comes down to nature. And I think, you know, if you kind of brand yourself as a mentor, that can put pressure, you can put yourself under pressure, whereby if I kind of look back and reflect honestly, I have probably been mentoring people I've worked with subconsciously for years. I think, you know, on a vocational level, talking about people working with racing, you know, I had spells in yards before I went to college and such like, whereby, you know, you're the new kid on the block, and, you know, yes, you understand about horses and routine, etc., but kind of that, you know, doing everything as people do in a working environment, you have to learn. And I think once you get the hang of it, there's a very clear kind of fork in the road, whereby when you're no longer the new kid on the block, the youngsters that come in, you can either choose to kind of sit back and watch them make mistakes that you made, and because it isn't you that's making mistakes, or you can choose to help them. You know, and I think that's kind of from the beginning, you know, so it wasn't, you know, the very first yard I worked in was Mark Tonkins in Newmarket, and after being there a month, I could already kind of help youngsters that came into the yard not kind of make a few mistakes I made. So I suppose even from then at 17, you're kind of having that mentoring mentality. And I think to sum things up, yeah, you know, before I went on the programme, you know, I Googled, you know, the definition of a mentor and try and get it clear in my mind, the difference between that and a coach. But just for me, it's almost, to be a good mentor is perhaps to try and, you know, be the hindsight for somebody, you know. And I think it's only when you know, we've all got experience in life, what we've done. And I think if you can kind of help share your experiences with your mentee, you can prevent them, and that's a two-way thing. You know, things that have gone well for you, you can obviously pass on, and things that you've experienced that haven't been quite so good, you can try and hopefully prevent people you're working with and trying to help, you know, going down perhaps the wrong road or taking the wrong path. So I think it's, for me, that's a key thing, is that you can kind of be hindsight for somebody, and I think that's invaluable.
Thanks, Carrie and Dana. And I think what shines through as well, which always shines through in the sport, that the most natural mentors actually often don't see themselves as a mentor. It's a tag. And as I say, we'll come back to that towards the end, but I think it sets a framework up really well for what mentoring is. And what I'm just going to do is just, again, put a few structures for people that still are trying to grasp, because that's a whole thing. It encompasses a lot. And one quote I got, which I thought summed it up quite well, is mentoring is to support and encourage people to manage their own learning in order that they maximize their potential. They develop their skills, improve their performance, and become the person they want to be. And I think that's again, that more well-being side than specific, you should do this, you should not do that. In terms of what mentoring actually, where it comes from, and for those of you that heard my first talk about on the mentoring program 8, 9, 10 years ago, whatever it was, it actually comes from Greek mythology. Odysseus asked Mentor, an older and wiser person, to look after his son in his absence while he's gallivanting around Troy, basically. So that was Mentor's role. And pure mentoring has at its essence a sharing of personal knowledge and experience. And I think that's very important, that, and we've seen that with Carrie and Dana and Beck have all elucidated, that there is that experience of making sure people don't do what you've done. But there's something larger than that as well, and I suppose this is part of it. I would say there are two types of mentoring, and certainly on this program we've always talked about the two. The one is developmental mentoring, where your aim is to develop your mentee's confidence and skills. And in terms of, if you're the other side of the question and you're a mentee, asking for mentoring is actually a strength, not a weakness. And it's something that we found out when we first had the program. And I mentioned this on an interview I was given recently, where we asked the 20 original mentors how many of them had been mentored, and only 2 out of the 20 had. And they all felt they would get there quicker had they been mentored, but they had enough drive to get to the positions they were in anyway. But when we asked why they hadn't had a mentor, they felt, and the culture's changed, and I think it's important, and the culture is changing all the time, but at that point they felt they couldn't have asked. They felt it showed weakness, it showed lack of performance, they would have been felt as needy, and they wanted to show that they were independent people that could look after their own careers. And we've turned that on its head by saying actually asking for mentoring is a strength, because it's showing that you're self-aware and that you want to take responsibility for your career, and you're acknowledging that you need help to encourage to develop as a person or within that career. So I think it's very important that we completely blow that taboo that asking for mentoring is a weakness. It is very much a strength. So that's the developmental side, and we've talked about that. People have kindly spoken already of how they develop. The other side of mentoring, probably the second aspect that is equally important for us within the industry, and putting that label on, is the sponsorship mentoring. And that's having a career friend who knows the ropes in the industry or in the organisation you're on, and is influential within that and can act as a patron. They can support you within your organisation, with the industry, and help you get to where you need to be. And again, we talked about that, and 10 years ago, sponsorship mentoring was very, very important. And there was research done that said that people that had been mentored and had been sponsorship mentored, so a patron had got and supported their career, had usually been promoted in 2 years. And we got all very excited about that, but then we found at the time that actually those 50%, 1 and 2 that had gone forward were actually men. And that in the case of women at that point, there was very little sponsorship mentoring taking place. Again, changed a lot, but I don't think we should lose sight of it. And this program, one of the main aims at the beginning was for us to say, okay, how can we collectively sponsor the women in the industry? So if we're not in a position to know what their next steps are, just look at all the squares here, and also the people that aren't here today. There are people that will have that information and that knowledge to help your mentee. So part of our collective sponsorship mentoring is asking the support system and the community, and again, never more important than now. So if we looked at some of the qualities, I think, Dana, you recognise straight away a safe space for your mentors. Support, again, Bex and Carrie and Joe, you've talked about the support. Those are things we need to offer our mentees. Challenge. very easy to give people and just accept everything they're doing, but sometimes they are doing something wrong. And as we say, we don't want them to make the mistakes we've made, and we don't want to make obvious mistakes as well. So there is a challenge, but again, in this environment, that needs to be more measured. It can't be perceived as criticism. It's more feedback. And feedback works both ways. You're giving them feedback, but you might be wanting to ask them for feedback. So if you're mentoring somebody, what's working for you? You know, what's working for your mentee? What could you do as a mentor to help them more? And actually, what doesn't work? So as a mentor, you might think you're doing everything you can for your mentor and they just don't seem to be grateful, but actually they might be seeing it completely different and find you a hindrance rather than a help. So I think it's always very important that we as mentors solicit feedback. I think, again, in a COVID environment, but certainly is accentuated, we need to be accessible to our mentors. And we need to check what that accessibility is, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. And probably one of the most important things away from support is we need to listen well. And so this brings us onto a listening exercise, which I've never done on Zoom before. So it's either going to be spectacularly successful or unsuccessful, but is one that I just want us to think a bit differently about how we listen. And so what we're going to do is have Naomi Mellor, who's very kindly agreed to talk to us for 2 minutes non-stop on a subject she's passionate about. And we're going to form into 3 groups. And the first group will be anybody whose first name begins between A and G. And we want all those people between A and G to listen to the language Naomi uses and notice anything that's interesting and worth remarking on. And put that on the chat board as they go. So that's group 1, A to G. Notice about the language, anything that's interested and worth remarking on. The second group is anybody between H and N, first names. And we want them to observe Naomi's body language, which is going to be a bit more complex for you, but again, as best you can, and see that how that body language relates to what is being said. So your focus group, the second group, is on body language and how that relates to what's being said. And again, put your remarks on that. And finally, O to Z, we want group 3 to listen to what is not being said. So this is the hard one, what is not being said, and we want to describe any emotions that the talk elicits in them. So I'll just repeat that. Group 3, listen to what's not being said and describe any emotion the talk elicits in them. And that's for anybody, first name O to Z. So if you're all ready, and I say by all means, just put your answers on chat as you go and just sort of write if you're first, second or third group. Naomi, I give the stage to you. If you can talk, it's a bit like just a minute, but it's so Naomi, for 2 minutes, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to set a stopwatch, Dina, actually, to make sure that I talk for about the right amount of time. I'm a little bit nervous about this, so please be gentle, everybody. So the subject I decided to speak on today, which is something that I am really passionate about, is the importance of spending time outdoors. For those of you who don't know me, I am a vet for my job. I've been a vet for 14 years now. And I've been really fortunate in that time to be working with horses for the majority of my career, which has allowed me, therefore, to spend my days in the open air, which I really appreciate. I think that spending time outdoors for me has had benefits not just for my physical health, but also for my mental health as well. And I think it is something that's been discussed an awful lot during the lockdown and during the pandemic. There's a lot of people who are now starting to recognise the importance of spending time outside. And for me, it's something that will always be very important to me. Somehow during 14 years of being a vet, I had never actually managed to acquire a dog until last year. And my husband and I bought a puppy for the first time just before the lockdown began, actually. And I have to say, she has really contributed to really ensuring that I get outside each day. I think when you spend a lot of time in an office, it's kind of easy to get a bit stuck there, and having the routine of having to take the dog outside every day is something that has been really beneficial to me. We're very, very lucky that we live just outside Marlow, and we live on the edge of some really beautiful countryside in the Chilterns. I also really enjoy running. I know, crazy, but spending time exercising in the outdoors is also something that I find very beneficial. And I heard something recently about the importance of red light in terms of the wavelengths of what we're exposed to. We get a lot of blue light from computer screens and our phones, and actually red light at the beginning and end of each day is something that is very beneficial to your health. So one thing I have been trying to do recently is get out at the beginning or the end of the day. So walking the dog or running either early morning or late afternoon, early evening is something I've really been enjoying. And anyone who knows about sunrises and sunsets and the beauty of those, I'm sure will appreciate the benefits that those can bring you. That's 2 minutes and 24 seconds, Dina. I should shut up.
Thanks, Nemi. That's fantastic. That really was good. So, where do we start? Actually, Lucy, can you and Roz, actually, let's find the chat board. Let's have a look, sort of help me with this. But we've got a lot of comment. So, Group 1, so Anne, a vet for 14 years, spending, and you've spoken about spending time outside several times, really well observed. It's so in your language that spending time outside, you've had 2 minutes, but you use that quite a few times, obviously really important to you. Group 1, personal well-being, got a dog, great, thank you, Gail. Dana, yeah, at one stage you got a bit stuck, and we'll talk about that in a second. Janet, Group 2, lots of smiling when talking about your new puppy. So again, it wasn't what you said, you were smiling, so it wasn't your words, but you were smiling, so immediately there was association. Lynn, very smiley and engaged positively. So again, you're showing enthusiasm, etc. Dana, you share what you're hearing from other people. Tallulah, Group 3. So this is about, remember what hasn't been said. Sometimes we need a reason to go outside and to give ourselves a challenge to go out. It could be that we have to justify taking time out when it should be part of life. Thanks, Tallulah. So again, there was that justification element. Dana, getting out. Carrie, passionate. Your passion, particularly about your puppy, came forward. Group 2, very engaging and open facial expressions. Anita, language accessible, easy to understand. Dana, appreciation of the presence. Again, Dawn, very positive words. Lucky, appreciate, enjoy, important. So again, the language told you a lot there. Zoe talking about what's not said, that without taking these steps, her mental health might suffer. Really important point. Naomi said nothing along with that at all, but that was the inference of what as a mentor you might take out of that. Roz, again, Group 3. So it's interesting, people are channeling on what doesn't say what happens when going outside isn't possible. So again, leaves that thought to our imagination, but a thought that we're all going through. Dominique, Group 1, in terms of listening, appreciation of horses and surrounding in her workplace, very clear. Zoe, again, Group 3, that as a vet, there may be high levels of stress that you're under. So this is really important to you. And again, we're not going to put you in the spotlight. It's more about the exercise, but things to think about. Alice, again, you listening to your language. Naomi feels lucky to have the job she does, but also lucky to live where she lives. Very lucky. That came across as strongly. Dominique, the beauty of the sunrises and sunsets. Again, language came across. Ree, what's not being said? Doesn't tell us why didn't you have a dog before last year, what put you off before and what's changed. Absolutely, again, fascinating change of mindset over the year. Joe, talking about the body language, open body language, maintained eye contact with the cameras, smiling and talking, hand gestures, nice fluctuation of pitch, easy to listen to. So yes, your body language was congruent with your words, which is interesting as a mentor to notice that when you're talking to somebody and they're saying, yeah, I'm really happy. And you can see it, yeah, I'm really happy. Things are going really well. You know, yeah, I'm so excited about life. It's your job as a mentor to a certain extent to notice when there's this disparity between what you see and what they're saying. And we'll come on to the importance of that. Gemma, use of the words, which allows me to spend time outside. Use of allows is interesting. Great pick up on, again, vocabulary. You know, why shouldn't you be allowed to be outside? Again, showing the changes. And Sarah, again, to say we're lucky to live here shows gratitude. Is there something you're comparing this to? Grateful not to be somewhere else, perhaps of old. So again, something there. And then Rose, again, looking at what's not being said, avoided mentioning any of the negatives and resilience needed when also working outside. So important that. And Sarah, all very upbeat. What about your indoor time? So thank you everybody for your contributions. Fantastic. So what does that tell us about listening? That was 2 minutes. Look how much you've elicited out of 2 minutes. So imagine when you have half an hour with your mentees or with your mentor. Listening is so much more than just listening to words. It's looking at the body language. It's imagining what people are going through, what that body language is telling you. And it's also, it's listening to what's not being said. And what's interesting here, there was more of the group 3, what's not being said. So when I come to listening, and listening has been the most important skill, that exercise took into account all aspects of listening. Listening is much more complicated than we think. It's much more important than we think. And if we take that space away from our mentee, we're not allowing them to express themselves, and we're not giving them permission to say what's really going on. And if you feel that what's going on from the unspoken side isn't quite what is being said, that's a time to challenge gently and ask a few open questions about that. And we'll discuss that, you know, the sort of open questions that might help. What's going on for you at the moment? Versus, we all tend to ask, how are you? I mean, on the phone call, first of all, how are you? What's going on for you at the moment? Or what will make your life easier right now? How can I best help you? What do you need from me? And if you want to look at the career aspect with somebody, what would a successful career feel like at the moment? What would your career going well feel like for you? And there's something else, I'm giving you a lot of information in a short space of time, but it's this exercise I think highlighted a lot, that some people do everything by listening, some people do everything by observing, and some people do it by feeling. And it's quite important to try and engage in that emotional space that your mentee has. So they'll often say, oh, that sounds like, that sounds as if, that sounds. And again, it's imitating that language. So you help match that language, help to get into their space. What does that look like for you? They're very visual. So try and get that visual side of things working. And if the emotions, what does that feel like? Really important at the moment. What have you just said? What does that feel like for you at the moment? So a few questions you might ask. So thank you, Nemi, and thank you everybody else. And we can talk some more about that at the end. I want to talk now about why mentoring relationships break down and trail off, particularly again in a harder environment. Often we'll find, well, actually, let me ask the question here for anybody who has been in that experience on either side. Why do mentoring relationships break down? Has anybody got any thoughts? Just again, open the mute and feel free to talk.
I think sometimes they do just come to a natural conclusion, Dina, as well. Like if you are being mentored through a particular stage in your life or career, and I've certainly had a mentor for very particular things at a very particular time, that then once that stage or that part of my life was kind of, I'd got through the difficult thing, or I'd done what I was aiming for, or you'd reached that goal, that mentoring relationship just kind of naturally concluded. And I think some mentoring relationships are long-term and some of them are short-term, and both are important. But I think recognizing that you don't have to be mentored by somebody for a really long period of time can actually be beneficial to both parties if you've got a particular thing in mind.
I think very true. And I think the important thing there, Naomi, is that both parties are aware that that is the case. Because the danger you have is that you as a mentee feels that, right, I only wanted you for that, and thanks, in the nicest possible way, you've outlived your usage now, goodbye, I'm on to something that I need for something else. I think it's really important that, again, your mentor knows that. So if you're the mentee in that position, when you start the relationship, have some clarity about what you need it for and for how long, and so that there aren't unmatched expectations on either side. But really good point. Sarah, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's very similar to that answer really, but lack of consistency. So if you start off quite well and you meet once a week, and then after that it kind of trails off a bit, and then it's been 3 weeks before you've seen them. So, and that's, I think, the benefit of formalizing mentorship. And I think when you can get, professional mentorship, instead of adding, some mentors end up having a huge job role, and on top of that, they're accumulating mentees. So I think establishing routine and consistency, and establishing that from the outset. How often are we going to meet? How long are we going to meet for, as Naomi just said? And being realistic as well as a mentor about how many people you can give this level of time to, because it's probably better to have a few quality sessions than having lots of mentees and really feeling jaded yourself.
I think that's really important. The sort of duty of care and what you do when you embark on a mentoring relationship. And we'll touch on that in a second. First, anybody else, and if I'm not seeing your hand, just put something on the chat board. Anybody else got any thoughts?
Dana, just to reiterate on Naomi's point, is that be clear up front why you've selected that person and you want them to be a mentor. And from that conversation comes what specifically do you want my support for? Because as a mentor, you need to be sure that you've been selected for the right reasons and you're able to give it, and the time period, how long a session would be, who's in charge of driving it. So setting some parameters. I mean, I've got some people who might only ask for help once a year because they're perhaps going for a big job, and that's fine. So, it's all about a shared need. And I think if you have a good relationship, even if it's been for a short period of time, that person can come back at you in 2 years' time if it was right to say, I'm going for another job. Do you mind if we can have a few sessions ahead of the interview? So it's, communication's key, but I definitely see mentoring as a way of sharing both a point of view, knowledge, expertise, but a different point of view is often one of the best things that a mentor can give you. Don't look for somebody who's necessarily going to always think like you, because you want an alternative approach potentially.
Brilliant, Lynn. And I think you've summed that up really well. And I think you've also alluded to that mismatch in pairing. It does happen. I remember my first mentor, when I started in the city, I was given this chap and I didn't quite know what I had him for. And we had one session and he sort of took me out for coffee and I really had no idea why I was there. He had really no idea, and there just wasn't a rapport straight away. So I didn't use him at all. And I think certainly if there's a mismatch in pairing, let's be honest about it. You know, if that happens on this program, just come back to us. Sometimes people don't click. You think you're going to, you're not. And we do have a sort of chemistry session that's there for it. But just be honest about it. It's not a personal failing. It's just some people we get on with and can help. And some people we want to help us and we suddenly realize it's not the right person. So, you know, nothing's broken. You just haven't clicked. A few of the other things that mentees are afraid to ask questions of their mentor, which again says something about the relationship. A mentor, a lot of mentors will lecture and impose their way of doing things. It's sort of my way or the highway. And that doesn't work for a lot of people. And again, generationally, as we're moving through the generations, that works less and less. So give your mentee, you know, space to choose, to listen, but to actually say, this isn't working for me, or this isn't, thank you, it's great advice, but actually it's not working for this, but this bit might do. But give them the space and don't judge them if they don't do what you've asked them to do. It's not right for them and they have their personal choice. Something now, again, with the crisis that I'm seeing through my coaching, that a mentee feels they're letting down their mentor in some way. And that might be a state of mind, but it's especially true. So a mentee will feel that they're perhaps not coming up the right way or not coming up to their expectations of their mentor, which it shouldn't really be like that. Or that the mentor's asked them to do something and they haven't got around to doing it because they're either too busy or not in the right space to do it. So they let the relationship break down, they just trail off. And that's for something as a mentor to pick up on that. The environment's got to be safe for them to talk, and it can't be at a superficial level. So just pick up on that. And also there's blame. You know, your mentor has given you advice and it was awful advice. You followed it and things haven't worked out and you blame that person. And, you know, blame's natural. And you think, well, that was, you know, useless. I'm not going back to them again. Forget it. Something to be aware of as well. If you're given the wrong advice or it seems wrong at the time, it's no such thing as wrong in the moment, then again, have that conversation. Which goes back to, I think, what Lynn and Sarah both talked about, sort of what we do when we embark on a mentoring relationship to make these things slightly easier on the outset. Firstly, it's knowing what your own individual boundaries are. And then when you have realised what they are, then think about your mentor and your duty of care. So let's talk about those initial very important boundaries. And I'm sorry if they sound slightly basic, but I think they're very, very important to the process being successful. Trust, confidentiality, they need establishing on the outside, both at the outset of the mentoring relationship. If you haven't done that now, don't worry about it, but it's something that you need to establish. And that trust, part of that is contracting the things you talked about, the hours, how long the sessions are going to be, what your mentor doesn't feel acceptable for you to go to them with, how often you meet. Something that people aren't asking their mentors or mentees at the moment. Do they prefer being mentored over the phone? Do they prefer over Zoom? Or actually, if possible, is a walk, you know, much more, is much easier. And especially when we're going through harder times, people are avoiding eye contact when they have something difficult to say. So staring at somebody in Zoom might not be the perfect place to mentor. So just something to think on and ask your, share that between you. Environment, when we can do that again. Is it a pub? Is it a coffee shop? Are they going to feel comfortable talking about their needs when they feel other people can listen? How many of us say, let's go for a coffee? Well, if that person wants to talk to you about something other than their career, a coffee shop or going to the pantry in Newmarket might not be the right environment for it, even when it opens. So think about those type of conversations where the people are going to be comfortable. Are you available in emergency? Can they call you at 1 a.m.? I had a client when I first started who liked to ring me at 11:30, 12 o'clock to tell me what was going on and what they'd done and what they hadn't. I soon established that I'd probably put in very incorrect boundaries. But again, at the moment, it's something to think about. And are they looking for support, or are they looking for feedback, as Naomi said, a more functional relationship, or do they want to focus on career development? Simone, I just want to open up to you on this, because obviously it's something that you will have experienced a lot through Racing Welfare, but also your other hats within the industry and your doctorate. What are your thoughts about boundaries?
Boundaries are vital, I think, to any relationship. And I think that example you just gave there, Dina, about when can you call me, when's it okay? Because I think it just provides real clarity and psychological safety, I think, for people within that mentoring relationship. So it's really important, I think, to establish that and establish those expectations, I think, very early on, right at the outset, in that contracting, agreement. So yeah, and I think when those boundaries get crossed is perhaps sometimes when things can break down. So yeah, they're pretty essential.
Well, thanks, Simone. Anybody else's thoughts? Because I'd like to think if people have had experience where perhaps the relationship's broken down, or things that they would like to draw the audience's attention to. Any other experiences people think about boundaries or why things trail off and break down? Yeah, Anita, thanks.
Well, I think coming from a mentee point of view, because I've been both a mentor and also a mentee, also on this program. So for me, I know that everybody's really busy. So from a mentee's point of view, I think sometimes we feel a little bit worried that we're taking up too much of the mentor's time. So I think when you were talking about boundaries, I think it's very good that the mentor would say, okay, this is what we can do. This is the amount of time I have for you, and we can do this over email or over the phone. So I think both, I think that's why that will be essential to set that out from the very start, so that you know when you can actually contact somebody and when not.
Thanks, Anita. Anybody else, any thoughts?
Yeah, Dina, I'm happy to say something here, if that's okay.
Brilliant, thanks.
I think sort of going back to the contracting from the outset, which obviously is very important, and actually keeping that fluid, because sometimes what is presented as an objective, it's actually something completely different. A different objective can emerge. So you think you're dealing with one thing from the outset, and actually by sort of the end of the second or third session, you're dealing with something else. And just one example I can give with my days at Jets was when one of my candidates, really, I felt, we weren't really getting anywhere, and they turned up at my office for another session one day, and I thought, I'm just not going to do the same thing and sit down and have the same sort of session with you, because it's not getting us anywhere. So I met him out in the car park, and I said, right, we're going for a walk. And I walked him to the top of our gallops, and we sat down to this sort of panoramic view. And we weren't face to face, we were sat side by side looking in front of us. And that was a real breakthrough. By the time we walked back, there was a pathway, there was a way. And that was something that that breakthrough, something I just hadn't achieved. And just by doing something different, by throwing the rule book out the window and doing something completely different. We kind of got there, and that's one session I've never forgotten.
Thank you. No, really valuable. And actually, Beck, I just wanted to come back to you, because that's something you do very naturally. It's not formalized for you, as you say, you do it naturally. You mentor the people in the yard, and what seemed really clear from the feedback is that they look to you to mentor, even if you're not consciously doing it. Where do you find the best space for getting people to really talk about themselves and you know, get into the depths of things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of sort of, I think my role over the recent years has been more caring for their mental well-being than anything. And I mean, being head girl, I'm in the yard a lot more than I'm out of the yard, so I see them, you know, more often than the lads that go racing with them or things like that. I see them first thing in the morning, I see them last thing at night. I'm in there and I'll muck out with them, and if I get a feeling, if you like, that one of them's struggling with something, then I'll find a way of creating a job we can do together. So we're not staring at each other, we are working together, and then the conversation starts rolling. And I won't ask direct questions unless I feel the time's right for the direct questions, but you get a vibe just from being with them, just talking about stuff, you know, and it does flow, and it flows very easily. And I always say, I mean, I'm interested in people, you know. If I'm on holiday and I sit on the beach, I people watch. And you could say I'm nosy, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but I find if you find out about their backgrounds, I mean, a lot of these lads, they haven't had the best upbringings. Some of them suffer with ADD or ADHD, and you have to communicate differently with them. And once you find, I always say, it's the horses, you find the key for the horses, you find the key for the staff as well. It's exactly the same. And I mean, sometimes if I do drive the lorry to the horse box and I have somebody sat with me for a few hours in the lorry, it's a very good time to get to know them. And most of the lads that work here have been here many years, so I do know them quite well. But the biggest thing for me, and massive, was doing the mental health awareness course with Race and Welfare. Oh, helped me so much, because, you know, I did start taking things home with me, and have I said the right thing? Have I said the wrong thing? Could I have said something different? And now I know the right people to call if it gets to a certain situation, telling them I can get them the help. There's so much out there that I didn't know about. And just a lot more thinking I'm going to be able to wave a magic wand and make everything all right. And now I know, just be there for them, listen to them, just say, I'm here for you. I'm sorry you're feeling like this. And the analogy with the bucket, you know, the overflowing bucket of stress. Oh, amazing. Because now I can sort of try and ask the lads, find out if they've got something like that, a hobby, or if they're struggling, can we find something that you can do that could just give you that a little bit when you're, you know, got some time to yourself, that can just release that. I have my dogs, that's my big thing, is my dogs. So anyway, I'm waffling.
That is just, it's so valuable and quite moving, and sort of takes us to exactly, I mean, you're clairvoyant as well, because I would just want to address what mentoring isn't, and Simone, I'll bring you in a moment on that, and Sarah as well. But I think it's really important, because you came across to something that we all do, but not with the awareness that you have done, is that we become rescuers. And an environment like this, a lot of people become coaches. I mean, I remember somebody telling me when I first started, you become a coach because you like rescuing people. And I thought, that. And then I thought about it, and actually there is an element of that. And we're not rescuers here. We're, you know, and I think what mentoring isn't, and it's really important to know mentally, you know, what it isn't, it's not therapy, and it's not counselling as such. And it's not arguably coaching, and that's an argument for another time, the difference between coaching and mentoring, because I want to stay on piece. But at the moment, more and more people are straying. And it's a worry for me in terms of making sure our programme is operating at maximum. And I think, Zoe, you've put it very, very clearly here: signpost to others' support. And I think this is a time that you have to know your own boundaries in order to work with other people. And you have to ask yourself, am I qualified to talk about this? So are you qualified to talk about drug problems? Are you qualified to talk about addictions? Are you qualified to talk about mental health issues? And if you're not, you have to get advice, because quite frankly, I'm a trained coach. I have part of that has been a psychotherapeutic and counselling dynamic to learning to do that. And obviously I've done a lot of CPD over the years. I would not touch the things like drug addictions or any addictions without seeking professional help. So it's knowing your boundaries, knowing that you're equipped, and knowing where you're not, and also knowing the signs. And actually, Sarah, I'll start with you before I move on to Simone, because obviously the signposting, a lot of it, Racing Welfare, thank God, is there to do that for the industry now. But Sarah, what do you see as the signs that if we're mentoring somebody, we should have concerns that perhaps I haven't?
I think, all I would be doing now to these highly emotionally intelligent people is telling them what they already know, which is you're always looking out for changes in behaviour. So if someone is usually very perky and then they're having a day when they're really not like that, then obviously they're obvious alarm bells. But I think I thought about this question in advance, and I thought so many of us are so good at being professional, which is wearing our professional face and masking how we're feeling and keeping the emotions to ourselves while we get on with the job, that really, unless you specifically mark out time to really ask someone how they're really doing, and then giving them the time and the space to listen to their response, I could talk all day about, oh, well, they might be displaying obsessive compulsive disorder, they might be fidgety, they might be crying, I could name 100 different things. But so often you won't get to the people who are really suffering, because they simply will be, you will not see much difference. So I think if you are really going to help someone who's struggling with mental health, I think you have to have a panoramic system where you're going to be democratic and fair and giving time to everybody and allocating time to find out. I think a tip I can definitely recommend is I saw Lewis Hamilton once in a video where a video interview with his father, and his father used to train him in go-karts. And his father would mark out on the ground with white tape that he wasn't allowed to brake anywhere before this white line. He could only brake after the white line. And he said, as a teenager, I used to just look at this and go, you are crazy, you're trying to kill me, Dad, if I don't brake till there. And his father always said, trust me, do not brake until there. And I think in a good mentoring relationship, and you are doing all the skills of a counsellor, there is a real power in silence. And when I say break late in a mentoring context, listen and don't speak until they've really told you. It's so easy to interject. And I thought during the fantastic 2 minutes that we heard in the listening exercise, it would be easy to interject and ask different questions at that point. But you learn so much more if you can sit on your hands and hold it and just let them speak a little bit longer. And I think that's where you really find out the context. So if someone might tell you something, you think, oh, that's because, or they feel that way, but it might not be. They will tell you the context. And I think sometimes it's holding the space open and holding the silence open that little bit longer than you might in an ordinary conversation with your friends, to really let them tell you what's happening.
Thanks, Sarah. Really good point about the value of silence. So let's get to the stage that we are out of our depth. and there are warning signs, might be suicidal tendency or changes in working patterns where somebody who's been, you know, the life and soul of and the hardest worker suddenly doesn't want to get out of bed. You can guide them. And I say the analogy of a drowning person is that if you're not a good swimmer, you don't rush in to save somebody that's drowning, you get somebody who's a better swimmer than you. And so the people that are best equipped certainly are racing welfare. And we can help people go to their doctors. We can signpost people to Mind if for any reason, you know, or if they're outside the industry and we're mentoring them. But if they're in the industry, Simone, do you want to talk a bit about the signposting and the pickup from your end?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So there is a lot that people can do. I always think, and it is important that if you are dealing with somebody and you feel that they are in a crisis, in a mental health crisis, or if someone's life might be at risk, then actually it's always going to be 999 and the GP always. However, if you know it's not a crisis or an emergency, then there's a whole range of support that's available really to anybody in the industry and to their close family members as well from Racing Welfare. And that range of support is available really in a whole range of ways. So from anything to immediate support. So for example, calling Racing Support Line, which is available 24/7, 365 days a year, where you will be put through to an accredited counsellor, a therapist. And there's someone there that you or someone else can talk to in the moment for immediate support. And through Racing Support Line, you know, people can have referrals to professional counselling. So, but someone would be assessed, and that would all be discussed, you know, to find out whether that is the right option for them. So counselling support, as well as that's available on the phone, that's available online, that's also available face to face if it's needed. So there is a whole range of that professional support there. Also, there's more, maybe it might not be actual therapy that someone needs, but, you know, support through our welfare officer teams. So, you know, just talking to somebody, it might be information, advice and guidance that's needed. It might be something else in life that's impacting for somebody negatively. So, so really those are the main routes, but we've also got everything from a new Wobot app. So a lovely little friendly Wobot who operates really on what we call cognitive behavioural therapy, and that's in simplistic terms really looking at how we can change negative thoughts and behaviours. And Wobot can check in with people once a day. He's actually very cute, so I would thoroughly recommend downloading that. That's all available. Sleep Station programme is available now through Racing Welfare to everyone in racing. So there really is just a big range of support, but the message is really, if anybody is struggling, would be encourage somebody to get in touch. Interestingly, a new service that's probably worth mentioning, anybody that is in a line management role, we now have a new service through Racing Support Line for management support. So anyone that is struggling with line managing another person, then you can phone and get some support with that. It might be about having a difficult conversation with somebody, for example. So they can help with that as well. So lots available. It's free of charge to anybody working in racing and to close family members. So
thanks,
it's all there. And the mental health courses, we've put in the chat box the link to the mental health courses that Beck mentioned.
So I think what I really want us to think about, maybe discuss now in the last few minutes, about any feedback from the session, and there's been a lot to digest. I think going back to knowing your boundaries, and but also having a duty of care that's perhaps more distinct than it was a year ago to your mentee. And also actually, and it works both ways as mentees, you know, some of us aren't teenagers anymore and we're being mentored and we might see our mentor struggling. And there has to be an equality both ways. Nobody's immune. So I've given the other side of the coin, but I want to end on a more positive before we go into just questions and people voicing their thoughts. What makes a good mentor? And as I say that, I'm sort of seeing people smile on the screens in front of me, which is nice to watch, because I think when you ask that, people immediately start reflecting on who's been a good mentor to them and seeing an image. And I would think if you have any questions or doubts about your own capability or feel actually that you are a good mentor, which is positive because somebody else has shown you, think of a person who at some times inspired you and led you in a different direction in your life. And just have that thought to yourself when you've got a moment, and think about what did they do that changed things for you. And I think if you're constantly asking that question, and I find myself asking it, you know, every few months, it does change the way you look at things. And you also find people that you haven't even considered made a real difference to your life through unofficially mentoring you or saying something at the right time. So thank you. The formal part of the session is now ended, but now we're going to open up to questions. So the board is open, or else just put your hand up or just crash in, and any questions or any thoughts that people had.
So I'll kick off, Dina. I had a quick question, which is about, with regard to formal mentoring, whether people are drawing up any kind of written agreements as part of their mentoring relationship, and whether formalizing it has extended that far for people so that you've got in writing what the expectations of both parties are, both from a time perspective and a learning perspective.
Really interesting, Naomi. It'd be interesting to see if anybody here has. I mean, I do as a matter of course for coaching, which is something different. For mentoring, I find that if you get something written down, it can inhibit the mentee from the beginning. So going back to what you're saying about building up that trust and rapport. So it's a fine line, especially at the moment. People might not want things written down, and the things that they might want to be talked about aren't the things that they want written down. But nevertheless, yes, as a matter of course, I would do it in a coaching, a formalized coaching, but that's a different relationship, and it's one of the, you know, and another of the difference between coaching and mentoring. I'd be interested here. Does anybody write down? I mean, I must admit, I do take notes on everybody I mentor, almost as if I'm coaching, simply because my memory isn't as good as it used to be. And something that somebody told me 3 months ago that might not seem important, if they're telling it to me again, it might flag up, or I can help them all, because I can refer to those notes and say, hold on, they wanted to do this, and I'm speaking to somebody, I can put them in their direction. So there is that's unofficial, but I'm interested, anybody here, any thoughts on that?
So we, on our course that we run, we encourage learners to, from the get-go, keep a diary sheet for each session that they have. Obviously on that sheet you would have your goals for what the mentoring relationship, what the outcomes you are hoping for from the relationship. Obviously, like you say, there are things that you would discuss during those sessions depending on what that person's going through at that time that you wouldn't write down on the sheet, but it's just mainly to keep the consistency of the goals and the outcomes throughout the mentoring process, to give you a reference point as to what, you know, what you've discussed regarding those points. We find that at the grassroots level, a lot of the mentoring is done actually in the workplace. So that could be riding out, it could be in the lunge pit, it could be clipping, there's a multitude of things, but you would have your goals and your targets, and so at the end of each session you would then set your targets for the next session with your mentee, so that you've got a clear point to work towards, and then everyone's on the same page, you know, as in the direction that you're going, and you're almost sort of ticking off those points as you go along. Anything else that comes with that relationship is kind of bespoke to you and your mentee. But we find that that's quite successful, and that's what we encourage our learners to do moving forwards with their relationships with their mentees. But that's just sort of how we've been taught by the tutors in the college that we work with, that's, you know, quite a successful way to do things.
Thanks, Dawn. Anybody else on that topic?
Dina, Anne's raised her hand.
Yes, please, Anne. Yeah.
No, just to say, Dina, I think my experience is very similar to yours. I always keep a note, because I think it's, and often it would be something that, you know, you've agreed verbally, like what is the purpose of our mentoring sessions. But I would never, well, so far, I've never sort of written it down as a sort of quasi-contract, because I think, like others, I think that somehow takes the sort of the space away, the safe space away, and there's a sort of feeling from the mentee that could be reported on, which I think is perhaps not where you want to go. But it is horses for courses, you know, mentor-mentee relationships do take a number of forms, but I really fully support the idea of having some sort of structured conversation at the start, so you know what you're trying to achieve.
Yes. Really important. And also that's where you do build the rapport or not. So if you'll have that structured conversation and it doesn't work, it's very easy to see very early on. And it might be on your onus on you as a mentor to say, look, you're clearly really talented, or you're trying to do this. I don't think I'm the best person for you, but I'm going to find the best person. I'm going to find somebody that's suited to you and is going to help you get to where you need to go. And you know, that this is not about you and me, it's about finding what's best for you. So that is a perfect time to do that. Somebody else had their hand up.
I'll have a little go.
Yeah, Anita.
I do, yeah. So I think certainly as far as kind of in a contractual way, I kind of haven't, or I wouldn't be inclined to write things down. But you know, once, you know, I'm fairly new into this role of mentoring, but I think having in the first conversation I've had recently, you know, once we established that kind of that importance of confidentiality and trust, I think then taking down notes has been helpful, because, and also I think as ways of kind of share my commitment to you know, and sharing things. So I've kind of embarked on a way where we've both written we've both answered the same questions, and then I think it kind of hopefully then it shows I'm giving a little bit to it as well, not just expecting to take from a mentee, but also you know, you get kind of common ground then, and things, you know, it forms a structure to talk about points that you wouldn't kind of necessarily have known or come across. And I think it's, you know, if you can kind of then, whether it's good or bad or indifferent, whatever kind of comments your mentee makes, if you can refer to those and kind of share similar past experiences, I think that makes for a stronger relationship. And rather than somebody giving you advice, you know, where they've just been kind of taught how to give you advice, but if it's coming from a personal experience, I think it has a much more kind of, you know, deeper impact.
Oh, thanks, Karen. No, I think I'll come to you, Anita, on that, because one thing to say about notes, and what I always contract with people I'm working with, if I'm going to take notes, I ask them. So if you're going to do that within a session, there is nothing worse than somebody sitting there, open their heart, and you're scribbling down, and and you haven't asked them, and so it's always just seek permission if you're going to do that. But I agree with, I mean, for me personally, that works. Anita, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with regard to writing down goals, I mean, again, coming from a mentee's perspective, I mean, I had a certain goal when I asked my mentor for help, but basically what came out of the conversation was a completely different thing. And it was really that I was given tips and tricks and pointers to things that I wasn't actually aware of myself. So with regard to the structure or the whole process, I think it's good to have a certain structure with regard to how you go about your conversation, but with regard to the goals, I mean, they might change along the line. So I would leave that very open.
Thanks, Anita. I think very, very pertinent at the moment. That, again, going back to what we said about that space, giving people the space to let things change if they change for them, and without making them feel they have to conform to your norms. There's an equality there that you're conforming to theirs. The question I would always ask is, who is this in service of? And as long as you remember that, then it tends to take you in the right direction. Now, I'm conscious of time because I know, Lucy, you want to talk a bit. Are there any final burning questions, or else anything afterwards? By all means, send emails through to Lucy, to Lula, myself, or any members of the committee, and we'll get back to you. But is there anything final for anybody burning, or should we just let Lucy conclude?
I can't see anyone waving, so I'll go for it. Yeah, just want to wrap up today's event really just by saying a really big thank you to Dina and Naomi also for letting us analyse her for 2 minutes, and also just to everyone else that's contributed. I hope you've all taken plenty away from the session. If anyone wants to know any more about the Women in Racing mentoring programme, I'm happy to speak to anyone on a one-to-one basis. My email is lucy.gurney@womeninracing.co.uk. So yeah, feel free to get in touch. And then just finally, we've got a few of our Careering Ahead webinars coming up, which I know some of you have been following, some of you have even featured on. And I know Naomi's got a few real big ones coming up. So haven't got dates to give you just yet, but keep an eye out for those.
I've actually just had an email this afternoon. The next interview is going to be with Julie Harrington, the new CEO of the BHA. So that's going to be at the end of April. I'm just confirming a date with her secretary, but yeah, that will be the next one in the series. So if anyone's interested in that, we had a lot of people come to Anna Marie's one, which was really great. And if you haven't seen it, it's still on the YouTube channel. She was brilliant. But yeah, Julie is locked in as the next guest, which should be good.
Good timing.
Well done, Naomi. Okay, so that's it from us really, and just a big thank you for joining.
And can I just say thank you everybody for being so communicative and open. It's really helped be a productive session, and very much enjoyed being part of it. And Naomi, thanks for putting your head above the parapet. And finally, Tallulah and Tallulah and Lucy for organising and thinking it through, and also Lucy, who is silently taking this mentoring programme to a new level with some really brave ideas and thoughts about it. And thank you, because it's the mentoring programme is as good as the squares we see. And so thank you everybody for being there, and Beck, thank you for joining us. Real treat.
Hope to see you all in person soon.
Yes. Keep safe.